In the grand and often tumultuous theater of international relations and global trade policy, President Donald Trump's repeated and strident assertion that Canada is one of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world stands not as a simple statement of fact but as a carefully constructed and profoundly misleading cornerstone of a manufactured political narrative. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. This provocative and unsubstantiated claim, which has been consistently used to justify aggressive protectionist measures and to actively stoke a sense of economic grievance among his supporters, is in direct and unassailable conflict with the overwhelming, unanimous consensus of economic data, meticulous expert analysis, and deep historical context. To truly and fully comprehend the profound inaccuracy and the sheer rhetorical deception of this statement, one must necessarily move far beyond superficial soundbites and engage in a comprehensive, exhaustive, and forensic examination of the verifiable facts. The undeniable reality, a truth built upon decades of policy and practice, is that the U.S. Canada relationship is a singular and globally significant model of economic integration, and the very foundation of this enduring and symbiotic partnership is built upon a deliberate and long-standing system of exceptionally low tariffs and remarkably open trade. The unassailable authority of data, a meticulous deconstruction of the tariff myth. The single most compelling and irrefutable argument against Trump's claim lies, not in rhetoric or emotion, but in the cold, hard, and unimpeachable data itself. This is particularly evident in the standardized methodologies utilized by globally respected and authoritative institutions like the World Bank to accurately and fairly measure trade barriers. The trade-weighted average tariff rate is universally recognized as the gold standard for this type of rigorous economic analysis because it provides a far more realistic, nuanced, and representative picture of a country's actual trade policy than a simple, unweighted average could ever hope to achieve. A simple average can be wildly misleading, easily manipulated, and fundamentally flawed, as a very high tariff on a single, low-volume, and often politically symbolic product, for example, a specific type of artisanal cheese, a niche agricultural good, or a specialized commodity, can dramatically and disproportionately skew the overall number. This skewed number can then be deceptively used to make a country appear to be a highly protectionist when, in reality, its core, high-volume trade sectors are virtually and purposefully tariff-free. The trade-weighted average, by contrast, correctly and justly assigns more significance to tariffs on high-volume goods that constitute the bulk of a nation's commerce, thereby reflecting the true and actual cost of trade on an entire nation's economy. To illustrate this critical difference in a clear and compelling way, consider a straightforward hypothetical scenario. Country A has a punitive 50% tariff on a single, specialty product that accounts for a minuscule 0.1% of its total imports, while all of its other, much larger import categories are tariff-free. A simple, unweighted average would fallaciously suggest a high overall tariff rate of 25.5%. However, a trade-weighted average would correctly and mathematically calculate a rate closer to a negligible 0.5%, 0.1% times 50% plus 99.9% times 0%, thereby accurately reflecting the minimal, almost non-existent, impact of that single, high tariff on the nation's total trade. It is this fundamental principle of economic measurement that exposes the rhetorical power of a decontextualized and misleading number, revealing it as a tool of political convenience rather than a reflection of reality. According to the World Bank's most recent and comprehensive data from 2022, Canada's trade-weighted average tariff rate was a remarkably low 1.37%. This figure is not merely low, it is not only among the lowest in the world, but it is actually lower than the United States' own rate of 1.49%. Of the 137 countries meticulously ranked by the World Bank, Canada stood at a distant 102nd from the top in terms of tariff rates. Its average tariff rate is less than half of China's, 3.09%, and a mere fraction of the rates found in other major global economies like India, 11.46%, and Brazil, 7.44%. The global consensus among economists and international trade experts is exceptionally clear and unequivocal. Canada is, in every measurable and meaningful way, a low-tariff nation, and the claim to the contrary is demonstrably baseless, factually incorrect, and intellectually dishonest. A forensic examination of the grain of truth. The entire, fragile premise of Trump's argument is built precariously on a single, isolated, and highly politicized aspect of Canadian trade, its supply management system for dairy, poultry, and eggs. This system, originally established in the 1970s, was designed with a specific and legitimate public policy goal in mind: to provide price and production stability for domestic farmers and to ensure a secure and reliable domestic food supply, a policy objective shared by many countries in various forms, including the United States. It operates on three distinct but interconnected pillars: carefully controlled production quotas, strict and systematic import controls, and a formula-based pricing mechanism. The import controls are the specific source of the high tariffs, which can soar above 250% on certain products, a number that, when presented in isolation and stripped of its context, sounds astronomical, unjustifiable, and like a powerful barrier to trade. However, to present this single, highly specialized, and niche policy as representative of Canada's entire tariff picture is to fundamentally, deliberately, and unethically misunderstand the true and comprehensive nature of the U.S. Canada trade relationship. The high tariffs are not a blanket policy that applies across the board. They exist within a specific, tiered system that is, in itself, a result of decades of complex and arduous trade negotiations. Under the USMCA, the very trade deal Trump himself championed and negotiated, the U.S. was granted specific, tariff-free quotas for a predetermined volume of dairy sales to Canada. It is only when U.S. exporters exceed this agreed upon, negotiated, and legally binding limit that the punitive over-quota tariffs are triggered. The crucial, and often intentionally unmentioned, fact is that American dairy producers are not currently filling their tariff-free quotas in any of the relevant product categories. This means that the high tariffs Trump cites are not an actual, present, or functional barrier to American exports. They are, in fact, a dormant policy tool, a theoretical deterrent that would only come into play if the U.S. were to increase its dairy exports to Canada beyond the negotiated and agreed upon limits, a situation that is currently not occurring. This crucial and often overlooked nuance highlights exactly why experts like Daniel Schwanen of the respected C.D. Howe Institute accurately described Trump's claim as having only a grain of truth. A single, technically correct fact, that high tariffs exist on a minuscule sliver of trade, is strategically used to create a profoundly misleading, disingenuous, and entirely false narrative about the entire Canadian economy and its trade relationship with the United States. As Schwanen meticulously explained, it would be really unfortunate if people got the impression that Canada is in general a high tariff country, because this is demonstrably not the case, as the World Bank data and all other available evidence unequivocally proves. The selective use of this specific, decontextualized example is a classic and effective rhetorical strategy employed by those who seek to create a false sense of grievance and justify protectionist actions that would otherwise be difficult to defend on factual or economic grounds. The unprecedented depth of economic and social integration. Beyond the isolated and highly politicized issue of dairy, the U.S. Canada economic relationship is a global anomaly defined by its sheer scale, its profound depth, and its seamless, unparalleled integration. It is, by a wide margin, the world's largest bilateral trade relationship, with an astonishing over $1 million in goods and services crossing the border every single minute. This immense volume of trade is not an accident of geography, it is a direct and deliberate consequence of decades of collaborative policy, including the landmark Canada-US Free Trade Agreement and NAFTA, which together established a virtually tariff-free environment for the overwhelming majority of goods. This profound economic interdependence extends to virtually every sector of both economies. The automotive industry, for example, operates as a single, integrated North American supply chain where parts and components, from complex engines to intricate wiring harnesses and electronic systems, flow freely and efficiently across the border multiple times before a final vehicle is assembled for consumers. This complex and highly efficient system would be economically impossible, logistically unworkable, and prohibitively expensive if significant tariffs were a constant and pervasive factor. Likewise, key industries in energy, timber, and cutting-edge technology rely on a free-flowing exchange of goods and services to thrive and remain competitive on a global scale. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, a U.S. government agency, confirms this reality, stating that almost all U.S. agricultural exports to Canada face zero tariffs or quotas. The factual record, supported by a unanimous consensus of government agencies, economic experts,